In the early hours of January 24, 1961, a U.S. Air Force B-52 bomber was flying above eastern North Carolina when a problem in its right wing turned a routine Cold War mission into one of the most dangerous accidents in American history. The aircraft carried two Mark 39 thermonuclear bombs, each with a yield measured in megatons. The crew did not know that, before the night was over, both weapons would fall toward American farms and small towns near Goldsboro. One bomb would descend under a parachute and move through much of its arming sequence. The other would slam into muddy ground and break apart. For decades, the public knew little about how close the United States had come to a disaster caused not by an enemy attack, but by its own nuclear weapons program. Later declassified records made the story far more alarming. The accident took place during the Cold War, when the United States kept nuclear-armed B-52 bombers in the air as part of a strategy known as airborne alert. The logic was grim. If the Soviet Union launched a surprise attack, bombers already flying could survive long enough to retaliate. These missions were meant to project strength and reduce vulnerability, but they also placed nuclear weapons above civilian communities night after night. The B-52 approaching Goldsboro had taken off from Seymour Johnson Air Force Base and was returning from such a mission when its crew noticed a fuel problem. A tanker crew later saw fuel pouring from the aircraft's right wing. The leak was serious enough that the bomber could not simply continue flying. What happened next would show the terrifying cost of treating nuclear weapons as ordinary cargo. The B-52 began losing fuel rapidly, and the crew attempted to manage the emergency while descending toward North Carolina. But the aircraft was becoming unstable. At high altitude, structural damage developed in the right wing, and the bomber began to break apart. The pilots had no realistic way to save it. They ordered the crew to abandon the plane, and several men escaped by parachute into the cold darkness below. Not everyone survived. 3 crewmen died in the crash, while others were injured or scattered across the countryside. As the B-52 disintegrated, its 2 nuclear bombs separated from the aircraft. This was not a controlled release, and not a military exercise. 2 thermonuclear weapons were now falling over American land, near sleeping families who had no idea what was descending from the sky. The 2 bombs did not fall in the same way. One weapon came down almost vertically and buried itself deep in a muddy field near Faro, North Carolina. It broke apart on impact, scattering pieces through the ground. The second bomb had a much more frightening descent. Its parachute opened, slowing it down as it drifted toward the countryside. To people on the ground, it looked like an enormous object hanging silently beneath white fabric in the night sky. The parachute was not simply a feature for recovery. In this accident, its opening helped activate parts of the bomb's arming sequence. The weapon came to rest intact in a field, but later investigations found that several safety mechanisms had already shifted into positions associated with a live weapon. The danger was not over when the parachute opened. The Mark 39 was designed with multiple safety mechanisms, because its detonation would have been catastrophic. Yet the parachute bomb passed through most of those protections during its fall. Its electrical systems activated. Its firing mechanism received power. Components that should have remained safely separated moved closer to an armed state. According to later technical reviews, 3 of the bomb's 4 safety mechanisms had failed or been bypassed. One final low-voltage switch remained between North Carolina and a nuclear explosion. It was a small electrical barrier, not a dramatic last-minute intervention by a pilot or soldier. If that switch had moved into the wrong position, the consequences could have been unimaginable. A thermonuclear explosion near Goldsboro would not have been a local accident. It would have devastated a vast area and poisoned countless lives for generations. That final switch is the heart of the Goldsboro story. For years, the public was told that the weapons had not posed a serious danger because nuclear bombs were protected by reliable safeguards. But declassified documents later challenged that comfortable version. A Sandia National Laboratories engineer wrote that the low-voltage safety switch had stood between the United States and a major catastrophe. The bomb had not merely fallen from a damaged aircraft. It had gone through a sequence of events that brought it alarmingly close to a condition where it could have detonated. The lesson was brutal. Systems described as fail-safe can still fail in several ways at once. On that night, safety did not come from perfect engineering. It came from the fact that one final component continued to function when everything around it had already gone wrong. The second bomb created a different kind of problem. It fell free without its parachute and struck the ground at high speed, breaking apart and burying important components deep in the soft earth. Recovery teams arrived quickly, sealing off fields and digging through mud in search of radioactive material and pieces of the weapon. They recovered much of the bomb, but not all of it. Some parts, including material associated with the secondary stage, remained too deep to remove safely and were left underground. The government purchased an easement around the buried remains, restricting digging in the area. There is no armed bomb waiting beneath North Carolina, but the fact that nuclear weapon components were left in a field adds another unsettling layer to the story. The crash ended in 1961, yet part of its physical legacy remains below the ground. For decades, the public version of Goldsboro was incomplete. Officials emphasized that no nuclear explosion occurred and that the weapons had been safe. That was technically true in the narrowest sense, but it did not explain how close one bomb had come to detonating. The fuller picture emerged through declassified reports, investigative journalism, and the work of researchers who studied nuclear safety. The documents revealed that the accident was not simply a bomb falling harmlessly from the sky. It was a chain of mechanical failures, emergency decisions, and safety systems being tested beyond their design. Goldsboro became one of the clearest examples of a broken arrow, the military term for an accident involving nuclear weapons or their components. The phrase sounds procedural, but the reality was two thermonuclear bombs falling on American soil. The Goldsboro accident changed how people inside the nuclear weapons establishment thought about safety. Engineers reviewed the Mark 39 design and pressed for stronger safeguards that could prevent an accidental detonation even if a weapon was dropped, burned, crushed, or torn from an aircraft. The incident also exposed the risks of keeping nuclear bombers constantly airborne. A strategy intended to protect the United States had created a situation in which a routine failure could have endangered it from within. The bomb did not need an enemy to launch it. It did not need a war order. It only needed a damaged aircraft, a parachute, and a series of safety failures. That is why Goldsboro remains so disturbing. It shows that the most dangerous moment of the Cold War could have come from a mechanical emergency over a quiet American farming community. Today, the fields near Goldsboro look ordinary. There are roads, trees, farms, and small communities where people live their lives without seeing any sign of the night two nuclear bombs fell from the sky. But the story forces a difficult question. How many disasters are avoided by good design, and how many are avoided by luck? In 1961, 3 crewmen died. Families near the crash sites faced a danger they never understood at the time, and the United States narrowly avoided a catastrophe on its own territory. The final truth is not that America was attacked or that a bomb exploded. It is more unsettling than that. America nearly suffered a nuclear disaster because one of its own aircraft failed during a routine mission. And the difference between history as we know it and a nightmare beyond imagination was one tiny electrical switch.